Now let's start our presentations with the first one, which is called Networking in the Dark. And the presenter is Geoff Huston, so we will meet him remotely. And hello. Hi, Mr. Huston. Can you hear us?
How are you? Oh. Yes, I can. Hopefully you can hear me too.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm leaving you here. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Look, it's a pleasure to be with you all today, and a pleasure to be here for the first BalticNOG. Wow, well done. I think you're on an exciting venture. I have seen many NOGs over the years, and quite frankly, I think they're the highlight of the community. It's where all of us who work in this industry can get together and swap our experiences and exchange sort of what we're seeing and hearing with what others are seeing and hearing. Now, I've got a short amount of time, but what I want to do is set the scene to actually understand where the internet is today in 2025. Because, to be perfectly frank, it's not the same network of 20 years ago. It's not even the same network as 10 years ago. So much has happened. A lot of this is all about scaling, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Our systems are now not moving megabits per second, we're moving gigabits per second. We're dealing with literally billions of devices and trying to make all of this work. And a lot has happened. We've seen a shift from transit and exchanges into content distribution networks and replicated content. We're trying to see, albeit very slowly, a transition into a bigger networking space with IPv6. And a huge amount of attention over security. But I think there's a bit more behind that. And that's what I want to delve into today, looking at the intersection, I think, of technology and some aspects of economics. You see, networking and networks are a very, very odd role. The network is a privileged position because the network, a shared public network, can see who's talking to whom, and at times they can see exactly what they're saying to each other. You know, all I have to do is look at your DNS, and I know what you're going to do in the next second, because your DNS has betrayed you. If I could look at what you're doing on the network, I know what you are, I know who you are, I know what you're about to do. I can build those profiles. So networks are privileged, always have been. Users have some expectations. And their expectation is actually the direct opposite. What they expect is privacy. What they expect is that whatever they say is not tomorrow's news. That they want to know that what they're saying is kept a secret between them and whoever they're talking to. And in many countries, including my country here in Australia, there were regulatory measures that if you told anyone else about what you'd learned when you were listening in on the networks, you would expect the full force of the law to come down and beat you around the head or something, because networks are privileged and users really don't want the network operators to betray their privacy. But that's what's happened, because that trust has been eroded over the last 20 years, in fact, over the last 40 years, I guess. We now run quite intrusive middleware that collects data on what users are doing. And part of that reason why we do that is because the internet, a bit like the newspapers and television of old, the internet is actually run on advertising. And advertising runs on information. And it's not information about the weather, oh no, it's information about me, what I buy, my habits, what I will need. It's information that profiles me as a target for a well-placed advertisement. Because in the words of the chief economist of Google some years ago, Hal Varian, a really, really well-informed ad is not intrusive. It's a gentle and timely suggestion about what you really need. So the better the profiling, the better the information that the network can pick up about you. Oddly enough, the higher the value of that information to advertisers, because they know the user so much better. But the cost of that is the erosion of trust through the erosion of privacy. Now, I think most users were prepared to live with that until around 10 years ago, because it wasn't just a commercial peering at what users were doing. Oh, no, no, no. It was in particular in the United States, where a number of state-based actors went way, way too far. And a contractor, Snowden, leaked information about the amount of data collection that was happening, particularly in the US. But because the extraordinary amount of traffic that transits the US, all of Asia tends to speak to Europe via links across the US, then it was kind of a global tapping point. And the Snowden papers really were a change, I think, in our attitude to this. Now, what the US was doing wasn't unusual. Probably still is doing it. And it's not just the US. This large-scale state-sponsored surveillance continues, but making it obvious, poking it under our nose, going, here, look at this. This is the amount of surveillance that's happening by state-based actors. Well, it kind of forced a reaction, and we reacted. This is the Internet Engineering Task Force, the part of the technical community, and their comment was, pervasive monitoring of things like the internet to find out what users are doing is an attack. It's an attack on privacy and users and organizations. It needs to be mitigated. We need to make protocols much harder to tap, leak less information. And what does that mean? It's a grand statement in principle, but how did we translate it? The first thing we did was clean up the web. You'll now see that almost everything is encrypted using transport layer security. So I know whom I'm talking to because we've done a handshake. I know that you can demonstrate that you own that domain name. Now you go, well, that's a pretty weak kind of test, isn't it? But it's better than nothing. It's a whole lot better than nothing. And to be perfectly frank, TLS is the underpinning, the complete underpinning of the security and authenticity framework for the internet. So as long as it's your domain name, yeah, it's you. I'll accept that. In the context of you, the individual, you, the organization, you, my bank. You know, TLS is at the heart of the security of the internet. But as well as authentication, everything is encrypted. And that session key is good, very good. It's at a level of encryption that, according to NIST in the US, it would take a significant amount of time, decades if not centuries, to decrypt that using the most powerful computers we could assemble. So this session key is not mucking around. It's encrypted and encrypted well. And how much of it is encrypted? This is the last 12 months gathered by Cloudflare. You can see that on Cloudflare's radar site. The dark blue, 98% of the traffic that Cloudflare, 97, sorry, delivered is now encrypted with TLS. The other 3%, I don't know what world they're living in, but it's an odd world, but it's very, very few folk. That these days, all of the web traffic, to all intents and purposes, across the world is now encrypted. But it's not just hiding what you say. It's hiding the metadata. Because you see, the thing that really is the blabbermouth of the internet is the domain name system. Everything you do starts with a query to the DNS. So if I can see your DNS, I know what you're going to do. You know, it's not a secret anymore. If you send all your queries to me, I know you. I know what you're going to do. I can profile you. I understand from that metadata exactly what's going on. So maybe the DNS should be a little more secure. And for years, the DNS has been an open protocol. It really has never even come to grips with the word security. You can do all kinds of weird, wonderful, and insanely dangerous things in the DNS, and no one can tell. It really was an example of a protocol from the early 1980s that is now living in a far more hostile world in terms of that environment. but it's still the same old open DNS it always was. But not quite. A lot of the work in the IETF and the DNS has been in terms of taking that kind of security, that kind of authenticity and encryption, and applying it into DNS, into exchanges. So now we have DNS over transport layer security. We can even use DNS over QUIC or DNS over HTTPS. So DNS is now able to be encrypted. This is a graph from measurement that we do here at APNIC, looking at the extent to which those encrypted protocols are used in the DNS. It's the exact opposite of the picture about HTTPS, unfortunately. About 70% of the traffic that we can see in the DNS is the same old open, unencrypted, insecure DNS as it always was. The good news is that about 3 years ago, it was a little bit higher. So it's slowly coming down. The green line is DNS over HTTPS. It was adopted enthusiastically by Google and by Cloudflare and a couple of other of the open DNS resolvers. To be perfectly frank, you folk, if your ISP's among you in the room there, you haven't adopted it. Now you kind of might say, well, what's the point? But in some ways, it is the point. The point is, it's a respect for privacy and the insanely easy to tap the wire in all kinds of places. You need to do some kind of measure of protection to stop that casual interception, and DNS over HTTPS and DNS over TLS provide that. The red line, DNS over TCP, the standard kind of, if UDP doesn't work, use TCP. So there are solutions. But oddly enough, outside of the small community of open DNS resolvers, which in most places is largely Cloudflare, Google and Quad9, there's not much uptake in the ISP business. There are probably reasons. But we didn't stop there. No, didn't stop there. Can we do further that if I'm the server and you're the user, when you come to me, I don't know who you are. And in essence, no one in the middle can put together who you are and what you're trying to do. We're trying to go into obscurity by making sure the endpoints of the content are not simultaneously discoverable. This kind of trick is done with two-layer encryption. And the way this works is that no single point has both of the keys at the same time in the network, because there's an outer layer, which is where you're going, and an inner layer, what you're trying to do. And you go, well, that's a bit obscure. Who does that? Oh, Apple. They've been doing this for some time. This is Apple Private Data Relay. Oddly enough, it's a pay money service. You need to have joined Apple and logged into your iCloud, etc., etc., etc. But the result is astonishingly secure, because in essence, my original IP address is not pushed all the way through the network. It only goes to the first relay, and then the relay itself becomes a proxy for me. But where I'm going is not disclosed to the first relay. It's only disclosed in the inner layer encryption to the second relay. So the website sees that I, or at least a relay, is asking a question that I originally devised. It doesn't know me. And each relay only knows it's either me or it knows where I was going to, but it cannot put two of them together. Astonishingly effective. And you'd kind of think it'd be popular, but oddly enough, it hasn't bitten that much. We'll see why in a second. So in some ways, the network is almost opaque, almost. But there's one thing that is still out there going, I know where you're going. Because when we try and start up that TLS session, that initial handshake, we disclose in open text where you're going to, the name of the service you're trying to connect to. That's still in the clear. And we know these days, and we've studied this for some years, how we can make it encrypted, how we can hide that from any casual onlooker. And it's all about using a TLSA record in the DNS, putting keys into the DNS and using encryption at that point. That relies on DNSSEC. I think I just swore, because almost no one, apart from the Swedes, are keen on using DNSSEC. There's just not a lot out there. Most users just do not see the value in actually doing it. So very few ISPs and very few users actually insist on having DNSSEC, in other words, DNS security, signatures in the DNS. And so the most effective way to do this relies on a technology that just simply isn't deployed. Cloudflare tried to cut through that, and they announced an encrypted client hello, but you've got to trust Cloudflare. And it's kind of, I give all my secrets to Cloudflare and no one else, is not exactly privacy, but it's better than nothing. So there's still work to do on that, and it's slowly moving on, but it's still not as fast as we'd like. The other part of this is we rely a lot now on certificates, because HTTPS, which basically is based on certificates, rules the world. But how do you unsay a certificate? How do you say, oops, that was a wrong one, don't trust it anymore? Well, we have the Online Certificate Status Protocol, which allows you to check if the certificate you're using is actually trustable or not. But a whole bunch of browsers, including Chrome, don't check. Why? Because OCSB says I am trying to go to that site, and it discloses my activity to that Online Certificate Status Protocol server. Oops. So in some ways, trying to seal up certificates and make them more usable makes the entire privacy picture a little worse, not better. So sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. So why are we doing this again? It's all about Snowden, right? It's all about users who care about privacy. They don't. Forbes was right when it said privacy is dead. Most folk don't really care. We'll happily tell Google search all of our secrets, all because we want a free instant answer service. Users are really not that sensitive around privacy. And we've given it up time and time again for free services. So it's not users. Users don't care about this. So why are we making the network dark, encrypting everything? I think it's because those 5 richest entities in the IT world on the planet, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and Meta, all of which these days have more than $1 trillion of market valuation. Wow. So it's the big folk. We're actually talking about the push of this multi-trillion-dollar industry of surveillance capitalism. Because Google spent a lot of money building my profile and your profile, everyone's profile, huge amounts of money. And for Google, the last person they want to get that profile and steal it from them is Apple or Microsoft or any of the other folk building similar profiles. That's Google's core asset. That's why the company is worth so much. And so protecting that core asset from leaking that information to everyone else is actually the objective here. Protecting it from other services, protecting it from the host platform, from the network operator and the network itself. That's the reason why we're actually encrypting literally everything. So if you sort of phrase it from the point of view of the application, whether it's the browser or any other application like Facebook or similar, what you want to do is to get the application to hide its behavior from the network, even from the host that it's operating on, to hide it completely so that no one else can see what that application is doing and what information it's picking up on. So how do you do that? Well, previously, we had this model of networking where the underlying kernel had the TCP drivers, the DNS libraries. All those libraries actually allowed you to easily build thin applications because all the services are done by the underlying platform. Great idea, but it leaks information like crazy. So we have to bring that out and move protocols like TCP out of the kernel of the operating system and lift it up into the application so it can run in secret. We need to change TCP. More easily said than done, because TCP is part of the kernel. I just can't create an application that says to the Linux operating system, stand aside, I'm looking after TCP. That doesn't work like that. The kernel says, no, you're not. I'm not going to touch it. Or your iPhone says, no, you're not. So maybe you could try a new transport application, SCTCP, and there's a few others like that. But quite frankly, if it doesn't work through NATs because v4 hasn't gone away, it's not going to work at all. And NATs are very narrow-minded. It lets through TCP, it lets through UDP, it doesn't let anything else through. So I can't build a new transport protocol, and I can't change TCP. So I'm forced into a different mode. I'm forced into using UDP and then encrypting everything above it. So these days, QUIC is a new transport protocol that to the network looks like UDP. QUIC is the 2020s transport protocol. It's what TCP was in the 1980s. It has a whole lot of things that TCP doesn't do, but it adds and it integrates TLS encryption with multi-streams, remote procedure calls, data integrity, congestion control, all inside an encrypted state where the network not only can't meddle with it, but it can't even see what it's doing. It's completely opaque. And you go, well, okay, how much is out there? Wow. Even today, 32% of the network traffic seen by Cloudflare Radar is QUIC. 1/3 of the network traffic is now completely encrypted. Everything. A study by Cisco from 2022, the big things that consume bandwidth on the network, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, basically QUIC. QUIC is consuming a huge amount of that traffic now, and it's only growing. So what we're seeing now is predominantly our networks are just hiding behind large layers of encryption. What does that mean? In the old world, the network operator, the local telco, the national PTT, was the giant in the communication space. They ruled the roost. Applications were just cheap little things. It's just software. In today's world, the network is the commodity. All it needs to do is provide bandwidth. And what you're seeing is the money has moved out from that. AT&T isn't a giant in the networking world. It was, but it's not. It's the Apples and Microsofts and Googles of this world that are the new giants. The application is attracting all of the investment. And the relationship between applications, hosts and networks, couldn't be worse. Mutual distrust and suspicion, or possibly even open hostility. The job of the network operator from the application point of view is add bandwidth, go away. Just go away. I just want bandwidth. I'll look after everything else. Quality of service, repair, you name it. It's the application that is now taking charge of the quality and integrity of the service and doing it at a level where the network operator can add nothing. For the network operator, there's nothing left to see, nothing to do, just packet shuffling. And quite frankly, this is a one-way street. If you think margins are bad in networking, they're only going to get worse. There's no coming back from this place. So what do you do when it's all encrypted, where everything is UDP over port 443? How do you traffic shape? Well, you can't. How do you load balance in the network, equal cost multipath? Well, you don't. How do you fulfill a regulatory order to, tap the network and give me records on this or that activity? Well, it's just a stream of encrypted bits. There's nothing there. So those traditional roles that the network operator was assuming are now largely being overtaken by events. You can't do that when the entire traffic is dark. We're living a different dream. And I think Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of PayPal, said it eloquently, and it's not a very nice thought. Peter Thiel is not a nice person. And the quote was, what you can't dominate, you commoditize. In his words, competition is for losers. That what we're building now is not a vertically integrated service network. Competition sort of rules the roost. That's not like that anymore. Control over the network is not control over the user. Carriage is not an inescapable monopoly. Replicated content and content distribution networks are used as substitute for transit. I would guess in wherever you are, Lithuania, Estonia, Sweden, here in Australia, most of the traffic that gets delivered to people like me, users, comes from a few miles away in the local data center. I don't pull packets from all over the world. Even the Zoom call, I'm actually talking to the local data center. What takes my bits from me to you into that room is actually a private connection from data center to data center, whichever particular transit operator in terms of a service operation, a CDN, that Zoom has a contract with. It's not the public internet anymore. So the network is now sidelined. The platform is sidelined. Windows is no longer relevant. Even Apple's iOS is no longer relevant. They're just task schedulers. Everything is now in the application space. And what this means, particularly in services like Quick, because don't forget, Quick is a user function, not a kernel function. It happens up in user space in the application. And every service, every application can define what it wants to do. It's actually the precise opposite of interoperability. We've managed to take the common parts of the internet and hide them and push value right up the stack into customized applications. What's the role of standards in this world? Hard question. Is open true? Is it really open when you can't see what's going on, where all the traffic is completely dark? I think open's dying. And I think this kind of world is a world where we've given a huge amount of the network space to those giants, those application level hyperscalers. And depressingly, I think they've won the prize, at least for the moment. And they continue to rule, and the rest of us are trying desperately hard to go, oh, we didn't mean it like this. Can we replay this in a different way? I don't know how that's possible, but, I think we've got to try. And I think that's where I got to. It's perhaps better as a closing talk than an opening talk, but hopefully it gives you some perspective on where the current industry is and the pressures behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Yeah.